We like to believe we are living in the age of information, knowledge at our fingertips, endless streams of data, breaking news flashing across our screens every second. But if you look closer, you will see something darker. The very same channels that promise us truth are overflowing with lies. Fake headlines travel faster than verified reports. Deep fakes blur the line between reality and fabrication. Politicians stand on stages with practiced smiles, selling promises they have no intention of keeping. Advertisers flood us with images designed to make us want what we do not need. We are not simply surrounded by misinformation. We are trapped inside an age of lies. This is not an occasional glitch in the system. It is the system itself. Lies today are not the exception. They are the currency of influence. They are the language of power. And here is the uncomfortable part. Intelligence will not protect you. Good intentions will not shield you. Even the clever, even the well-meaning find themselves manipulated, divided, and often defeated. Because lies are not only louder than truth, they are faster, simpler, and far more seductive. This may feel like a modern disease, a side effect of social media and 24-hour news cycles. But the truth is that the problem is far older. 500 years ago, in a world without the internet, without television, without radio, one man already saw it with piercing clarity. He recognized that lies have always been the sharpest weapon of the powerful. His name was Machiavelli. And as you will see, his advice for surviving the games of rulers and manipulators might be the most useful survival manual for our time. Because if you do not understand how lies work, you will inevitably become their victim. To understand Machiavelli, we must first understand the world he lived in. It was early 16th century Italy, a land divided into city-states, each clawing for dominance. Florence, Machiavelli's home, was a place of beauty, but also of endless intrigue. Alliances shifted like the wind. Armies marched through its streets. Families plotted against one another for power. In this world, survival was never guaranteed. Machiavelli was not born a prince. He was not a noble, he was a civil servant, a man inside the machinery of government. For years, he worked behind the scenes of Florence's republic, drafting letters, negotiating with foreign powers, watching men rise and fall. He had a front row seat to the brutal reality of politics. Stripped of all illusion then, in 1512, his fortunes collapsed. Florence's ruling family returned to power, and Machiavelli was cast out. He was imprisoned, tortured, and exiled from politics. From that point on, he had no influence, no stage, no official role. What he did have was memory and insight. Out of bitterness and exile, he wrote the book that would make his name immortal, The Prince for centuries. This book has been cursed and condemned. People accused him of teaching evil, of corrupting rulers, of praising tyranny. But Machiavelli was not inventing corruption. He was describing it. He was not teaching leaders to lie. He was pointing out that they already did. This is why his work matters to us. Machiavelli was not a preacher, not a dreamer. He was an observer. And unlike most observers, he was honest about what he saw in his world. Power did not reward purity. It rewarded cunning. That lesson, uncomfortable as it is, has never stopped being true. Machiavelli's great insight was simple and devastating. In the struggle for power, truth is rarely enough. It is lies that usually win. And they win for reasons built into human nature itself. The first reason is complexity. Truth is complicated. It requires patience, explanation, and often background knowledge. Lies, on the other hand, are easy. They come in neat packages. They reduce tangled problems into slogans that fit on a banner or a headline. Which do you think most people will remember? a careful lecture on economic policy, or a catchy phrase shouted in the marketplace. The second reason is speed. Truth must be tested. Evidence must be gathered. Claims must be checked, conclusions must be proven. That takes time, but lies can be launched instantly. They spread like sparks in dry grass. By the time the truth has caught up, the lie has already done its work. Studies show that false information spreads many times faster than corrections. Machiavelli saw the same thing in Florence. A rumor could topple a leader long before facts were verified. The third reason is emotion. Truth is often dry, even dull. Lies are colorful. They appeal to fear, to anger, to hope. They give us villains to hate and heroes to worship. They create a drama we want to believe in, whether or not it is real. Machiavelli knew that leaders who mastered emotion had an advantage no opponent could match. This is why century after century, lies rise to the surface. It is not because people are foolish. It is because lies are designed to be easier, faster, and more seductive than truth. In politics and society, what triumphs is not always what is right. It is what people can be made to believe, quickly and passionately. That was true in Renaissance Florence, and it is just as true today. If lies so often win, the question becomes, how do rulers use them? What rules guide the game of deception? Machiavelli distilled his observations into a handful of principles that strip away every illusion about human behavior and political power. The first principle is appearances over reality. People judge with their eyes more than with their reason. A leader does not need to be virtuous. He only needs to appear virtuous. A show of generosity, a staged act of piety, a speech about justice. These can outweigh the truth of greed, cruelty, or corruption hidden behind the curtain. Machiavelli put it bluntly. People see what you seem to be, not what you truly are. The second principle is fear over love. He argued that it is safer for a ruler to be feared than to be loved, as long as he avoids being hated. Love is fragile. It fades when circumstances change. Fear, however, is steady. People may complain about a harsh leader, but they are far less likely to challenge him. Fear is a stronger shield than affection. The third principle is reputation over fact. Machiavelli stressed that what people believe about you matters more than what you actually do. A leader who carefully manages his image can survive mistakes that would destroy another. Control the story and you can control the outcome. The fourth principle is ends over means. A ruler must be judged not by the purity of his methods, but by the success of his results. If deception preserves stability, if cruelty prevents chaos, then deception and cruelty may be justified. It is a cold logic, but one Machiavelli insisted was the logic of power itself. These principles may sound ruthless. They are, but Machiavelli was not prescribing them as moral ideals. He was describing the world as it worked, stripped of fantasy. And the more closely you look at our own time, the harder it becomes to deny that his principles are still in play. If Machiavelli's principles explain the logic of power, his observations also reveal the tactics, the playbook that manipulators use to put that logic into practice. These tactics are not relics of the Renaissance. They are alive, well, and more polished than ever. To recognize them is the first step to resisting them. The first tactic is control of appearance. A ruler or manipulator knows that what people see is more powerful than what they cannot. This is why leaders wrap themselves in symbols, uniforms, flags, ceremonies, stage settings. It is why corporations spend more on branding than on truth. Appearances are armor. They turn fragility into strength. The second tactic is the use of fear. Love inspires loyalty only in calm seas. Fear controls in the storm. By pointing to an enemy, whether real or invented, a manipulator binds people together and keeps them obedient. Fear of chaos, fear of invasion, fear of being left behind. It does not matter if the threat is exaggerated. What matters is that fear makes people cling to authority. The third tactic is simple storytelling. Complex realities are reduced to black and white. Heroes and villains, us versus them. This is how lies gain traction. They do not compete with truth on accuracy. They compete on clarity. People prefer a story they can understand to a truth they must wrestle with. The fourth tactic is repetition. A lie told once may be doubted. A lie repeated 100 times begins to sound familiar. And what is familiar begins to feel true. This is why propaganda thrives on volume. It is not about convincing the intellect. It is about wearing down resistance until the lie feels like common sense. The fifth tactic is short-term bait. Manipulators promise quick rewards and hide long-term costs. A tax cut today, debt tomorrow, a product that dazzles now. Disappointment later. People are drawn to the immediate, even when it undermines their future. The deceiver knows this and exploits it relentlessly. The sixth tactic is noise. Flood the field with distractions, conflicting reports, endless chatter until no one can tell what matters. In a fog of confusion, people surrender to the loudest voice, or the one that offers relief from uncertainty. Silence is the enemy of deception. Noise is its ally. The seventh tactic is rewriting the story. Control over the past ensures control over the present. By shaping how events are remembered, manipulators dictate how people act today. Nations, corporations, even individuals constantly rewrite their own histories to maintain power. Machiavelli knew that memory is pliable, and that whoever shapes it rules the future. Taken together, these tactics form a manual of manipulation. None of them requires genius. None of them requires truth. They require only an understanding of human weakness. And once you see them at work, you begin to notice them everywhere. In politics and advertising, in culture itself. A deceiver does not need you to believe completely. He only needs you to act as if you do. And that Machiavelli warned is more than enough. If you want to see Machiavelli's playbook brought to life, you need only look at the man who inspired much of The Prince. Cesare Borgia for Machiavelli. Borgia was not a saint, not a genius, not even particularly noble, but he was ruthless, and he understood the rules of power. Borgia was the son of Pope Alexander VI, and he used that position to carve out his own dominion. In Italy, his strength did not come from virtue. It came from spectacle, from fear, and from manipulation. He mastered appearances, dressing in the trappings of command, surrounding himself with soldiers and symbols that projected invincibility. He also understood the use of fear. When one of his own commanders, Ramiro de Orco, grew too brutal and threatened to turn the people against him, Borgia staged a public execution. He had the man's body cut in half and displayed in the town square. The message was unmistakable. Borgia would protect his people from cruelty, even cruelty he had first allowed. The fear of rebellion shifted into gratitude, and his power solidified. Borgia knew the value of narrative. He presented himself as the defender of order. In a time of chaos, he promised stability, while rivals offered only more turmoil. By controlling the story, he turned ruthless acts into signs of leadership. Machiavelli watched all this closely. He was struck by how Borgia combined cruelty and generosity, fear and mercy, always with calculation. To Machiavelli, Borgia embodied the truth. Power does not flow from purity, but from the skillful use of perception and force. For Machiavelli, Cesare Borgia was proof that manipulation is not an accident of politics. It is the engine of it, and in a world where appearances, fear, and narrative still dominate, his example has lost none of its relevance. Cesare Borgia may belong to the Renaissance, but the methods he used are not relics. They are alive in fact. In our century, they are more powerful than ever, because what Machiavelli observed in city squares and palace courts has now been amplified by technology, multiplied by scale and accelerated to lightning speed. We are living in what can only be called an age of lies. Consider the reach of misinformation. A rumor in Florence could spread through taverns and marketplaces, reaching hundreds in a day. Today, a false story can reach millions in minutes. Social media algorithms do not ask if something is true. They ask only if it spreads, and lies spread better than facts. They are shorter, simpler, more emotional, and more clickable. The architecture of our digital world rewards deception. Look at deepfakes and manipulated images. Machiavelli wrote that appearances mattered more than reality. In his day, appearances meant clothing, ceremony, and ritual. In ours, appearances mean edited videos and carefully curated online identities. A single clip doctored and shared can alter reputations, sway elections, even ignite violence. The eye still rules over the hand. Think about advertising. Corporations promise happiness in a bottle, confidence in a car, security in a subscription. The product often cannot deliver what the image suggests, but the image itself is enough to drive action. This is Machiavelli's principle of reputation over fact, repackaged for a consumer society and politics. Machiavelli would recognize the strategies instantly. Leaders create enemies to unite followers. They reduce complex issues into slogans. They repeat simple claims until they feel like common sense. They flood the information space with noise, so no one can tell where the truth lies. The tactics are the same as in Borgia's Italy, only the tools have changed. What makes our age distinct is scale and speed. Lies are no longer whispered in corners. They are broadcast on screens in every home. They travel faster than the truth can ever catch them. And because of this, they shape reality before reality has a chance to speak. If Machiavelli were alive today, he would not be surprised. He would simply note that human nature has not changed. What would astonish him is how willingly we allow the same old tricks to fool us again and again, now amplified by machines we ourselves have built. This is the essence of the age of lies. It is not that lies exist. They always have. It is that they have become the environment in which we all live, breathe, and make decisions. To survive in this age requires more than intelligence. It requires vigilance, and it requires knowing. Exactly what Machiavelli saw 5 centuries ago. If lies are everywhere, the question is not only how deceivers succeed, but why good and intelligent people so often fail. Machiavelli offered an answer that is as unsettling as it is true. The failure of the good is not in their intelligence, or in their morality. It is in their assumptions. They play by rules that the deceiver has already discarded. The first mistake is believing that truth speaks for itself. Many assume that once the facts are clear, people will see reason, but facts are slow, tangled, and often dull by the time the truth is ready. The lie has already captured hearts and minds. The second mistake is underestimating appearances. Good men think that substance will outweigh surface, that actions matter more than symbols. But in the eyes of the public, symbols are often stronger uniforms, ceremony slogans, staged images. These create impressions that facts alone cannot undo. The third mistake is assuming that moral purity protects against defeat. People of conscience may believe that their integrity will carry them through, yet in politics morality is not a shield. Without strategy, integrity is often crushed by cunning. The fourth mistake is refusing to learn the language of power. Many avoid it thinking it is dirty beneath them. But ignorance does not shield you. It only makes you vulnerable. Machiavelli insisted that to survive, one must understand the rules of the game, even if one chooses not to play them in the same way. This is the bitter lesson. You do not lose because you are foolish. You lose because you assume the game is fair. And in the age of lies, the game has never been fair. If the mistakes of the good leave them vulnerable, then what can be done? Machiavelli never promised to make the world virtuous. What he offered instead was a survival manual. He showed how to see through deception, how to read the moves of the cunning, and how to protect yourself from being crushed by them. His advice, stripped of Renaissance trappings, is as useful now as it was 5 centuries ago. The first principle is to ask who benefits. Machiavelli believed that every public action, every speech, every policy carries an agenda. The question to ask is not whether it is true, but who gains from it. A lie is rarely random. It is crafted to serve someone's interest. By tracing the benefit, you trace the motive. The second principle is to judge by actions. Not words. Promises are cheap. Speeches are crafted for effect, but actions reveal intention. Machiavelli warned that rulers often speak of justice, mercy, and faith while quietly pursuing ambition. Words are theater. Deeds are reality. The third principle is to doubt perfection. When a story feels too simple, too clean, too flawless, it is almost certainly a construction. Real life is messy, complicated. Contradictory narratives that erase the mess are designed to manipulate. Machiavelli advised suspicion of anything that seems too good to be true, because it usually is. The fourth principle is to step back from the mob. Crowds are easily stirred, quickly swept up in anger or hope. Machiavelli knew that in the frenzy of the crowd, lies thrive. Unchecked, the antidote is distance. Step away, think alone. Resist the pull of collective emotion. Only then can you see clearly. The fifth principle is to build your own credibility. In a world of lies, personal reputation is armor. Machiavelli understood that even the cunning respect strength if your word is known to be solid. If your character is trusted, you become harder to manipulate. Reputation cannot eliminate deception, but it can shield you from its worst effects. Together, these principles form a strategy for survival. They do not require you to become a liar yourself. They require you to become watchful, skeptical, and deliberate. The age of lies may reward cunning, but those who adopt Machiavelli's advice can navigate it without being destroyed. The lesson is stark. In a world where appearances dominate, where fear is weaponized, where narratives overwhelm facts, survival demands more than goodness. It demands clarity. Machiavelli's gift is not a map to a perfect world. It is a compass for surviving a corrupt one. And in an age like ours, that compass is more necessary than ever. Machiavelli's principles can sound abstract, but they are not meant to live only in history books. They can be applied in the small choices of everyday life, where lies and manipulation are just as common as in the halls of power. Let us look at 3 simple scenarios first. Imagine a friend sends you a shocking news story. It looks urgent, it feels true, and it demands you act immediately. The instinct is to share it. Machiavelli would warn you to pause. Ask who benefits from this story. Look for the fingerprints of manipulation. Often the person who gains is not you, but the one who spread the lie in the first place. Second, think of the workplace. A company announces a dazzling new incentive, promising quick rewards or easy advancement. The offer is exciting, but Machiavelli would ask you to look at the long-term cost. What is being hidden? What is being demanded in return? A short-term gift may be a long-term trap. Third picture of the political stage. A leader offers a simple solution to a complicated problem. The words are clear, the promise attractive. But Machiavelli would remind you that reality is never so neat. Doubt perfection. Complexity is a sign of truth. Simplicity, when it erases the messy details, is often a sign of deception. These are not grand lessons for kings alone. They are tools for anyone navigating the noise of modern life. You cannot stop others from lying, but you can decide how you respond. And that choice is the beginning of freedom. At this point, a danger appears. When people hear Machiavelli's name, they often think of cynicism, of cold manipulation, of leaders who will do anything to gain power. It is true that his writings have been misused to justify cruelty and deceit. But we must be clear. To study Machiavelli is not to become Machiavellian. Machiavelli was not preaching immorality, he was recording reality. He described the world as it was, not as people wished it to be. He wrote for rulers, because rulers held the fate of nations in their hands. But the lessons apply to all of us, because the dynamics of power do not stop at palace gates. They shape workplaces, media, culture, and even our friendships. The purpose of learning his advice is defense, not corruption. To recognize the tricks of deception does not mean you must use them. It means you can guard against them. There is a line between understanding how power works and embracing every ruthless tactic for yourself. That line matters, as Machiavelli himself warned. Manipulation may win power, but it can also breed hatred. Fear can protect a ruler, but hatred can destroy him. The lesson is not to glorify deception, but to see it for what it is, so you are not blinded by it. Learn the game, recognize the moves, but do not lose yourself by becoming the very deceiver you are trying to resist. We began with a question. Are we living in the age of information, or in the age of lies by now? The answer is clear. Lies have become the air we breathe. They are faster than truth, simpler than truth, more seductive than truth. They dominate politics, shape markets, and flood our daily conversations. And yet, 5 centuries ago, one man saw it all with astonishing clarity. Machiavelli dared to describe the world as it really worked. He stripped away illusions and showed us that appearances rule over substance, that fear outweighs love, that reputation bends reality, and that the ends often justify the means. These were not moral lessons. They were survival lessons. For us today, in a world of misinformation, fake images, and manipulated narratives, his words are not relics. They are warnings, and they are tools. They remind us that goodness without strategy will be crushed by cunning, that integrity without vigilance is not enough. But they also remind us that understanding the game does not mean surrendering to it. We can see clearly without becoming corrupt. We can defend ourselves without becoming deceivers. This is the true power of Machiavelli's advice. For an age of lies, not to glorify deceit, but to sharpen our vision so that we are no longer helpless in its grip. So let me ask you, in your view, what is the greatest lie of our age? The story everyone accepts, the narrative repeated until it feels like truth. Share your thoughts, because the more we recognize the lies around us, the harder it becomes for them to control us. In an age of lies, clarity is strength. And strength now more than ever is survival.